Please pray with me. May these thoughts and feelings that I share be grounded in my soul, encouraged by the God presence in me. And may these words you hear be captured by your soul, enlivened by the God presence in you. Amen. It has been a challenging past 3 months, and it feels good to be back. I do want to take this morning to try and give a brief picture of my restorative time, and as best as I am able, to give you a sense of where I am at now. So to answer that big question, how am I doing? The short answer would be, I'm improving and still recovering. The reality of accepting that my emotional and mental health has been compromised has been difficult for me. I, like most of us, have been raised to bury and deny our internal stresses. But I am beginning to see that I need to be looking at this in a new way. Fortunately, my doctor recognized I was in trouble before I did. And it was with her encouragement that I made the decision to step away. I was suffering from what is known clinically as compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue. Empathy is a central part of effective ministry, and empathy becomes more deeply felt the longer you are in a single community and the better you know the people that make that community up. It becomes increasingly more difficult not to feel and absorb the traumas that others experience and share. Compassion fatigue builds up in your system something like cholesterol. Slowly. And in my case, built to a level that shut me down. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and even to some extent physically. I lost my capacity to care. And the realization of that was truly devastating. My first few weeks away from here seem now almost surreal. I was lost. I was so very, very tired. And I seemed without purpose or meaning. In a lot of ways, I felt numb. But over the weeks, as I began to recover, to feel less fatigue, I uncovered another layer of fatigue, not directly related to the pastoral responsibilities. I haven't been able to find a clinical name for this one, so I choose to call it religious fatigue. Religious fatigue. For nearly 7 years now, I have been patiently and mostly gently leading this community towards a new spiritual paradigm. The traditional understandings of the nature of God, the nature of Jesus, of the nature of spirit, and of the nature of worship may continue to serve some of you. But for many more of us, and for the thousands more in our wider community that are unchurched, these traditional paradigms are losing or have lost meaning. This is at the heart of my religious fatigue. We have come a long way here. I know this from the spiritual growth and deepening that I witness in so many of you, and also by the regularity with which newcomers and visitors are overwhelmed by the Spirit presence in this place. But I have a growing sense in this past year that we have reached a point where further change, especially in this gathering, is meeting greater resistance. So the question becomes, do we stop now and maintain what we have, which is good? Or do we continue to evolve towards an even stronger, deeper, and more vital spiritual community? That's the question. In the story I shared with the children this morning, Karamba, as hard as he tried, couldn't fly. He couldn't fly with the rest. For me today, those flying cats in the story are a metaphor for the traditional institutional church, and I am Karamba. No matter how hard, no matter how long I have tried, I can't fly with the traditional institutional church. And so looking back, it feels like it was compassion fatigue that grabbed my one paw, and religious fatigue that grabbed my other paw and lifted me way up and dropped me hard. Dropped me, as it turned out, into the depths of my being, where I discovered not death, not even failure, but a soul teeming with abundant life. I could swim just like Karamba. This is where I needed to be. This is where I wanted to be. This was home. I am being called, my friends, to swim deeper. Deeper than the doctrines and the dogmas, deeper than the ancient hymns and the archaic prayers of a religion that frankly has very little flight plan left. I am called to swim deeper, always into and toward the Spirit that dwells at the heart of all of life. For me, this is what Luke's story is about. Rather than seeing this as a supernatural miracle of Jesus, where he was able to fill a net with fish, or rather than seeing this as a prophecy of Jesus that these fishermen would soon be filling churches with believers, and those are the ways that we most often go with this story, let's choose to see this story as Jesus saying, if you want abundant life, if you want a full net, you need to plunge your whole being deeper, into deeper water, and learn to swim. This, it seems to me, is the reality of embracing the notion that we are spiritual beings learning what it is to be fully human. For me, this is what Mary Oliver in her poem The Sea imagines a growing and deepening spiritual life looks like, where we become one with all of life, past, present, and future, where we become whole. Stroke by stroke, she writes. My body remembers that life and cries for the lost parts of itself. This yearning, this deep yearning, is the key to spiritual growth. And I believe that this spiritual growth, this human awakening, needs to happen in community. We can't do this alone. But it can't be a church community rooted in the dogmas and doctrine of traditionalism. It needs to be a church community willing to boldly reclaim the central tenet of the very first Christian communities that shared all things in common in love. Jack Jezreel, founder of the Just Faith communities in the States, writes, the spiritual logic of a community of faith is that they live a smaller but living version of what they seek for the larger world. The spiritual logic of a community of faith is that they live a smaller but living version of what they seek for the larger world. A community that makes very intentional commitments. He continues, community rooted in great love is an engine for peace and fuel for justice. We are made for each other. As a species, we have always known that we could not survive, could not flourish without each other. Whatever is to prosper, grow, or multiply will only happen with the nourishment of people who are for each other in significant ways. This is the kind of community I yearn to be part of. This is the kind of community I am even willing to guide, if asked. My deep hope is that this community might be this kind of place. And we are already on the path. You see, my friends, it is when we realize that we can't fly, that we discover the depths of the spirit of love available to us and learn to swim. Amen.